Welcome back to We Know Scripted TV, where today we know Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 4, 12 Angry Girls and One Drunk Travis. My name is Grace, but of course, I'm not alone. Jess Sterling is here. Jess, how you doing?
I'm good. I would love to I often try to get out of jury duty, but I feel like I would love to be a juror in the Coach Ben.
I've never been summoned for jury duty and kind of want to do it. I know that sounds weird, but I feel like it's get some time off work, go be in a jury.
Sure. In
Yeah.
my experience, and I didn't get picked, keep in mind, but I
Uh-huh.
did have to go. It's a lot of sitting around and waiting. Um, and as someone
Oh, you
with
can't second screen while you're
yeah, I
doing jury
can't you
duty?
can't picture in picture your real life.
Oh,
And so
man.
as someone with, like, semi-diagnosed ADHD, not for me.
Hmm.
Gotta say, not
Hmm.
for me. I get very bored.
Well, you
But
know who
yeah.
else the jury and the trial might not be for is Coach Ben. Seems to go pretty poorly for Coach
Yeah.
Ben.
There were
Yeah.
moments, Grace. There were moments where it was looking okay. It was looking like he may be, innocent, but
Shauna.
Shauna,
Yeah.
ooh, she has it out for him. I have some thoughts on this, Grace. I have some theories
Hmm.
on why she is so vehemently, like, anti-Coach Ben. Um, but yeah, not a great Coach Ben episode in that, like, big spotlight on him as a character. But, in terms of whether he lives or dies, really not a great episode for him.
Yeah. I think that this is a pretty fascinating episode, mostly from the Coach Ben stuff, because I feel like it is so different than what we get on the show. It's a long, extended sort of like set piece thing that happens. But also just from the character perspective. I chatted with Coach Ben, Steven Kruger, the actor who played him, talked to him a little bit about this, and then some of the other cast members as well for Parade. I chatted with them, and I feel like for me, this is such a moment where um, I feel like it's really emblematic of what the show tells us, but in a different sort of way, in the sense that so much of what we've chatted about the show is science versus faith and that debate, and it kind of, I think, all of that sort of thinking that they've been doing about whether or not, is the wilderness, providing for us if we make a sacrifice and that sort of thing, sort of culminates in this moment where they all are thinking about, whether or not Ben did it or not, and whether it matters that Ben did it or not, if enough people want him to be found guilty of having done it um, for some reason. And I think it's really interesting to think about like why Shauna does push and then why everyone goes along with it. This feels so much more just like traditional Lord of the Flies than I think the
Certainly.
show has given up to this point.
I totally agree. At a certain point, it really doesn't matter if he did it because it's what the girls think, whether or not they think he did it and whether or not they just want a person to blame for it, and whether or not it's necessarily as a result of whether or not he started the fire, but maybe some of his other actions as well, right? The judgment that he has had towards the girls and the cannibalism, the fact that he really didn't help Shauna when she gave birth to her baby, right? There's a lot of reasons we could look at Coach Ben as, kind of other. Um, so yeah, there's a lot to go through with the past of it all, but then of course, if you've just wandered in here, like, please leave, because I'm about to, like, do a major
Oh
big
yeah,
spoiler time.
big
um
time spoilers.
Lottie is dead? Question mark. Like, we end the episode with seemingly Lottie's death in the present day. This is wild. Definitely wasn't expecting this. It's very much just like a boom out of nowhere. We're dropping bombs and then we're exiting the episode. So I'm really excited to talk through all of that as well because I saw a lot of similarities, Grace, in the visuals of it all and her death and what we've seen in past seasons in the wilderness.
Yeah, this looks like the place that young Lottie had her vision, the candles and
Yeah, like the
the
baptism
underground.
vision. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot here, pretty big headline. Yeah, that Lottie is dead. And I feel like, yeah, the Ben stuff is like so fascinating, but Lottie is dead, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like it, and we get barely any Lottie this episode, like, very tiny moments with her that I'm excited to talk about because maybe we can try to piece something together at least, from the very, very little that they gave us. But first, Grace, I do now that 3 episodes have aired already before this one, obviously this is the
Mhm.
4th episode, where
Mhm.
people have been able to now fully theorize on some stuff
Right.
that's happening. And I feel
Right.
like we've got some pretty significant theories from the results of season 3, episode 3 to talk through that obviously, we're dropping podcasts as soon as the episode comes out. We're not really able to participate in the theorizing with everyone else until the following episode. But coming out of season 3, episode 3, we have this ice cream parlor voicemail. Now, if you call the number that is given on the show, you get a voicemail. There's a whole message about this ice cream parlor, the one that Ty has, the no-eyed man is in. And apparently, at the very end of the voicemail in Morse code, it says, the screams are not what they seem, which we know, Grace, is a reference to the trees screaming that Travis hears.
Yeah, this is news to me. You were like, people called the voicemail and then a deciphered Morse code. Is like, that sounds like a lot of work that I
A lot
I
of work,
would
yeah.
a lot of work. The screams are not what they seem. That's a fun message to that's very fun that the show put this in and that somebody figured it out. It's very interesting.
Hmm.
To me, the screams, I don't know. I don't even know if I know what they seem like. I mean, they seem like people screaming. Uh, and then I interpret that as like the wilderness screaming. But Jess,
Yeah.
this is like now too late. It's like you have to know what the screams are or what they're supposed to mean, and then what they're not supposed to mean.
Mhm. And now neither of us has Twin Peaked, but apparently this is a Twin
Right.
Peaks reference.
Super embarrassing for us. We were like, we
I
should probably
really
both
need
watch
to.
Twin
I'm
Peaks.
so sorry, people. I really
Yeah.
need to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is really interesting because it is something again that is happening in the present day, but certainly a reference to the 90s storyline.
Right.
The other theory, Grace, that we have to talk about is so many people online, everywhere, Reddit, anywhere you look, people are saying, oh, this is interesting. Season 3 looks like it was filmed almost with like this yellow filter, this yellow tint over it.
It
And
has a yellow jacket.
it has a yellow, exactly. The camera is wearing a yellow jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are theorizing that these girls in the wilderness, these teens, are unreliable narrators, and that all is not what it seems. Maybe the screams are not the only thing that it's not what it seems, because people are saying they think that this is like their romanticized version of what they're actually living through, that they're kind of going through some sort of like shared hallucination, shared psychosis. People point out the yellow filter as being one of the reasons they think that, but also these huts look really good. And Aquila and the animals, right? We saw her um
She's
holding
holding
a
the rabbit.
holding the rabbit, not dissimilarly to how she treated the mouse in the season before, and it turned out the mouse was not alive. So is this some sort of idealized version of what they're actually going through? And Grace, another point that was made in this behind this theory was when Van is doing the kind of big hero speech about, oh, and then the girls, they fed that fire for X amount of days. And Shauna is the one saying, like, this is ridiculous. Like, she is kind of trying to talk truth into the situation.
Hmm.
That's another thing people are pointing at. So what do you think of this theory, the yellow tint theory?
So my initial thought was I don't it's not that I don't believe it, it's that I didn't like it. I have I think that and then I feel like I've slowly come around that it's not exactly um as bad as maybe I would have thought it would be. Like my initial thing is like, oh, I don't think I want it to be that. And I've come around a little bit on why I think it can make some sense, which is I think my first thing is that it's like it's a pretty it's a trope we've seen
Yep.
in movies and television before. That doesn't mean it can't work. But it does require quite a bit of like I guess like it requires a lot to make it work. I do
Right.
think the more I sit and think about it, the more I think it could work to a degree, in the sense that I have had this. I've been like going back to this thing of, has everything we've seen so far been bad enough for Shauna in particular and the rest of the Yellowjackets in the modern day timeline not want the information to be revealed? Like
Right.
we've heard stories, like true life events, where like they had to eat somebody. There was a movie, Society of the Snow, came out, boy, I want to say it was last year, but it might be 2 years ago now, on Netflix. It's about a plane crash on a mountain where like, yep, they ate people because they had to survive. And like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like we're like, oh, they're awful people and there's anything bad. I feel like the more that my theory was like, it will continue to delve, because and I still think this is possible, that like this is a real turning point for Shauna becoming like the leader out there. I think in terms of everything that happens with Coach Ben, and really taking control of the situation and arguably making decisions that are more questionable than the choices they've made. um Even the choices that they made, there's still a degree which like it is bad that they like picked cards and killed somebody, and then like
Mhm.
Javi feels like a line that is different, that they weren't like starving, unless I'm misremembering that.
Well, and they actively tried not to save him versus
Right,
Jackie, which was obviously an accident.
right.
Um, I'm kind of with you, right? I see where this can be very difficult to pull off for
Hmm.
any show. Now, I believe in the Yellow Jackets creators to be able to do this if they so wish. Um, it would be kind of difficult though to like spend the majority of the season thinking that everything is one way and then have the rug pulled out from under us towards the end. But I do think there is a little bit more credence because this theory came up prior to episode 4 airing. I do think this episode actually maybe possibly also kind of contributes to that theory. I'm
I mean,
thinking,
the trial of it all is pretty like, did they really like get dressed up like that? Did they really like as
yeah,
opposed to just being like Shauna condemning Ben to dying right like as soon as they found out? I don't
mhm.
know.
When Ben arrives at their camp and he's kind of looking around and he's like, wow, like he is impressed, right? And then later on when he says like, I respect your belief system or something, both of those things, in my opinion, I feel like you could look back when we're later into the season and be like, he was putting it on because he knows they're losing their minds. Again, I'm really like actively looking for it at this point. I feel like if we're gonna point to one thing being uh the most obvious way this could work as a theory is Aquila and the animals. The fact that they have penned rabbits and ducks and all these other wildlife in like 6 months. Like wild rabbits, I'm just going to say it. They're not pets. They're not domesticated. They're not just coming up to you. They're very scared. It's wild to me that Aquila can like literally just be cuddling a bunny throughout this entire trial and the bunny's cool with it. Maybe I am just like maybe there is an amount of like suspension of disbelief that you have to have when watching the show, but worth bringing up. I thought that this was like an active theory.
One thing I would love to see, has anybody gone back and watched the feast scene where they are dressed up, and whether that has the same filter that this
Um,
has? Has anybody done that? I feel like that's,
that's interesting. No, I haven't seen that, but I have seen lots of comparisons of like this is what season 3 looks like versus season 1, and it's very obviously like way more yellow tinged than
yeah. So when I
season 1.
first saw this theory, I will say I thought people were saying like, oh, the whole time they've been like, everything we've seen out there has been, which I don't think is true. But I noticed it, the like the time jump with the like the first thing that got me was like the very nice tents, the like very nice like shelter huts that they've built
Yeah.
are like so nice that those feel pretty like that to me already. I had pretty immediately like a notion of like, oh, I'm having to suspend my disbelief a little bit to think that
Yeah.
like they have been, they were able to create these out there. So I'm not, as long as it's not, I think as long as it's from that point on,
Yeah.
um, um, the alternate, that's funny, I would say real version, like if what's happening is the truth, is that like the wilderness provided for them and was able to like
Mhm.
help them out. But I don't think that there's nothing to this theory, and I'm
Yeah.
less feeling like as put off by it as I
Yeah.
was. So
One last little kind of note for the column of this could be fake. It would make a lot more sense that Mari had that kind of monologue about two realities when she was talking to Coach Ben. When she was captured by him in the cave, she mentions two different realities, kind of two different timelines, right? We discussed that last podcast. So I don't know. It's an option. It's something out there. We'll see if it's accurate. And then one final, not even really a theory, more as just like a dream interpretation, is people are surmising that the slap bracelet seen in the joint hallucination last episode is, symbolizes a purity test of sorts, which is why Shauna is deemed the least pure, and Aquila, who in my opinion seems kind of the purest soul. I feel like a lot of times the purest people love animals. Um, she is kind of viewed as the savior.
right. Um, was that a thing? Them being those bracelets being like purity like, is that,
Oh, in
I'm
real life?
in real life?
No, I
No.
there were bracelets that were viewed as purity bracelets, but
Did you have
not
did you have
slap
the
bracelets.
colored bracelet, did you
Yes,
have
we
this thing
did.
where the
Yeah, for those
colors
who grew
represented?
up in the 90s and early aughts, you'll remember there were bracelets that denoted what you've done with other people sexually. Certain colors meant certain things. And gosh,
See,
if that doesn't explain some of our trauma from that time.
my recollection of it was that if you wore the different colored bracelets, and then if someone broke it, you had to participate in that thing with
Oh,
that
that's a different, so that, and for me at least, was you would take, gosh, this is okay. We're gonna be
I
done with this
know,
very soon, I promise.
I know.
The bottle caps of like bottled soda, there was that little blue thing in the cap. You would pull that out, you would stretch it and make it a bracelet. Wear
Wow.
the bracelet, and then if someone ripped it off of you, then you were forced to,
Wow.
so on and so forth.
Yeah. Tells you a
Anyway,
lot about the, consent at the time of the
sure,
1990s as well,
sure.
that you just yeah. Anyway, alright, I actually I wanna start in the modern day, and I'm going to I think we could kind of end with Lottie, 'cause there's a lot there, but also it is like the cliffhanger of the episode. I actually
Yes.
wanna start with Shauna, uh, and Jeff, and the breaks.
Yes.
And so last week, the last week's episode, the breaks are cut, and Shauna is pretty sure it was Misty. And she
Mhm.
goes to get the car checked, and her brakes seem fine. And you and I had a little bit, we were on a similar wavelength, in the sense that I sort of like, I think after episode 1 and 2, I was like, "I don't trust Walter." And you were like, "But no, like, he went through the phone and, like, it got the W." And I feel like I was a little bit harsh on Walter, but also I'm still sus on Walter, which is that I think Walter might be right, but his actions, he doesn't, he killed some people last season. He killed a person, I guess, last season.
To protect Misty, let's point that out, because I do
Right.
think that is a point in favor of this theory that Walter is responsible for the breaks.
Yeah, so maybe it's what, but seemingly the mechanic is like, "No, your car is fine. This just happened." So, what do you make of that? It's,
I trust that Walter, I think it's funny where we do have the reason Misty is so suspicious is because she did something like this to Nat's car, in order to force
right,
Nat to accompany her in her vehicle, to go somewhere.
right,
Now, Shauna then accuses Misty, but I think Walter is much more subtle than Misty is in terms of his chicanery. So
right,
I could easily see him being the one who messes with the brakes as a way to show Misty that her friends aren't actually her friends, which is what he's been trying to do. Because all episode long, we don't really have a ton with Misty, but when we do see her this episode, she's like trying to see if Walter is trying to contact her, and he isn't, seemingly. So, up until the very last moment, obviously, which we'll get to.
Right.
So, certainly, this could be a Walter thing, or it could be nothing, but usually there's not a ton in Yellowjackets that's nothing, right? Like everything means
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it does feel like it does feel like it's got to be something. Jeff thinks it's karma for what they did to Kevin.
I
like
love
these,
Jeff.
like,
I love
Jeff
him
is
so much.
Jeff is very Jeff is I mean, he's not, let's just be clear. He's not the MVP of the show because this is a female driven show
Of course.
where the women are the best. Also, Warren Cole is incredible.
Such a himbo. He is like the best himbo, right? There's
Yeah.
no book club. Like we get so many iconic lines from Jeff, and him just being like, he's just a sweet boy. He's just a sweet boy. He just wants to get good karma. So he's gonna donate items. I love Callie being exactly like Shauna and being like, where's my stuff? Tell me you're not donating any of my stuff. Give me a
Yeah,
to-go
for real.
bag from the food bank. Like what
Yeah.
a monster. And he says, no, we're gonna go volunteer. Him, oh my gosh, Jimmy McGill vibes of him running bingo at the
Oh,
retirement
yeah.
facility.
Very good.
He was the best. I loved him there. So he's trying to get them better karma. Inadvertently, he signs them up to help out at the same place Misty works, which
Yes.
Shauna's not a big fan of. And I love him stating the most obvious thing ever, which is like, there's something going on between you guys. Huh, Jeff, what was your clue? Maybe the fact that they're sniping back and forth at each other.
Yeah. Jeff is love. I love him being an immediate hit at bingo. Them loving his little puns is great.
And Randy being very upset about it is also just great.
It's very good.
But we get Shauna.
Yeah.
She's left to do the tapioca, which she actually doesn't mind.
Doesn't mind. Yeah.
But she gets locked in a freezer, and there she sees Jackie. Of course, it's a very cold place. It makes sense.
Ella Purnell, back-to-back weeks on the show. We love it.
I love Ella Purnell. I love her, and I love when they bring her back. And I wrote down a line that she says, Grace, because I found this interesting, kind of along the same lines of you saying, what are they hiding, right? Like, what exactly are they hiding besides the cannibalism of it all? Jackie says, not just for what you did in the wilderness, but for what you did when you got back.
This is because this is a timeline that we have not really explored on the show. Of we've seen kind of one clip of them kind of getting off the plane and coming back to back home, but other than that we haven't explored it, and it is really, to me, there's like a lot of opportunity there to go to that time period and play in that of the moment they came back and what that fallout was like, because that to me I mean, I think the reason we haven't seen it is because I think it probably holds a lot of information in terms of like what happened in the wilderness, and then why Shauna in particular and other people
and who's
would want
alive still, if
who's
anybody
alive.
else is alive, right? They're not going to necessarily go to that well very quickly.
Yeah. So this to me is interesting, but this is pretty big for like a line that gets delivered, in the middle of this episode. One line from Jackie, who obviously is like dead, but this is like Shauna's conscious to some degree, is what she's like seeing and hearing. So yeah, this is, I think this is very exciting that it's like there's Shauna also might be up to no good when they came back probably to cover up what they did, but yeah.
I believe it. Yeah. And, Jackie's like, oh, you're just going to don't worry. It's like you'll feel warm eventually, like right before death, right? Like taunting Shauna. Shauna is very obviously scared, trying to get out of this freezer. Eventually, Randy lets her out. Shauna thinks it was Misty. She immediately goes to someone working at the facility and asks where Misty is, but Misty left hours ago. And I don't know how long we are to believe that Shauna was stuck in the freezer for. I don't think it was that long. But again, when we have these kind of unreliable narrators and we're not exactly sure about the passage of time, it makes it a little bit difficult.
Yeah. I think this is the same freezer that Carmen from The Bear got stuck in as well.
Oh,
he's like right
only
next
bad
to him.
things happen when you're locked in a freezer.
Yeah. But again, we're like really hitting home the point of like Shauna does not trust Misty. Feels like probably, though, as much as it could have been an accident, it's probably Hillary Swank who put her in the freezer, right? Locked her in the freezer? Yeah.
Probably Hillary Swank. Most people think Hillary Swank is Melissa. I've also seen a theory that it is Melissa's sister, that like we're gonna be
Oh,
misled, and that it is someone who is related to Melissa,
Melissa,
but not
Melissa,
Melissa.
like getting offed back home, and then like Melissa's sister, like
I think that's interesting, right?
yeah.
Um,
And
so
so I
yeah,
also sometimes because I just need to like make sure I have the characters' names right. So I like look out the Yellow Jackets. There's a Wikipedia page that's like the Yellow Jackets team, and I always laugh when there's this like one girl, and it's I can't remember her name. I'd have to pull it up. But it's like Jennifer, and then below it says did not go to nationals. It's like wow, what a
oh,
few Jennifer.
Natalie.
Is it
Natalie didn't go to
no?
No, Natalie went to nationals. What was her name? I don't remember. Alice.
I
No,
know. See,
I don't know.
yeah,
So
see.
is it not Allison, the one with the ridiculous accent at the reunion?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. I forgot. I forgot
Love
that we
her.
see. Yeah, Allie. Yeah, I forgot that we see
Allie.
adult
It was
version of
Allison.
her.
Okay,
But
great. Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
Um, can we talk about Van and Ty in the present day?
Let's do it. Yeah.
So after the events of last episode where the waiter choked on the food and seemingly they saw that as the wilderness choosing, they're letting it choose. So now their latest thing is they're going to go to New York City. They're going to buy a pack of cards, take out the Queen of Hearts, and just put it on the ground and see who picks it up. At first, Grace, I totally misunderstood what was happening here. I don't know if you were immediately on board with what was going on. I thought that whoever picked up the card they saw as the wilderness is going to kill them. So they wanted to track that person and see if they died. But unless I'm incorrect, it seems like no, their plan was they're going to let the wilderness choose who they are going to
To
kill.
kill. Yeah. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is some other tie nonsense. We all can agree on that, right?
I mean,
We are seeing way more of other tie than the show wants us to think we're seeing.
oh, that's interesting. Have we figured people haven't there's not really like a tell yet, right? That people are
Well, my
people
my tell, and this is me.
Mhm.
I feel like Tawny Cypress and her eyes are so expressive. I can
Right.
see it in her eyes when she's other Ty. Now, whether or
Right.
not that's true, like last episode when she's lighting the candle and like chanting, right? That's other Ty, I
Right.
think. So this, in my opinion, there's a lot of other Ty going on, and they agree not to kill the man, right? Van is kind of the one who's like, "Are we really gonna do this? Like, I'd rather have," because Ty says, "I'm not ready to like lose you yet," and Van says, "Well, like, I would rather have this time with you without us killing someone. Like, let's just make the most of it." They end up going to buy a pretzel and doing the like Central Park in a carriage
Mhm.
ride situation. We do see Van's handshake, which is an indication that indeed the cancer is back. Grace,
This is a lot. We're going back and forth. The Van has she doesn't have cancer, and she maybe has cancer
it just wants
again.
and it wants and it wants, and the wilderness is never satiated. Grace, I think other Ty is going to go kill that man.
Oh, I think that that's absolutely yeah. This continues to be more of a criminal record for Ty in the modern
At least she's
time
not a state
period.
senator anymore, though.
That's true. She's not, but she's done a lot of bad stuff.
A lot of crimes
A
happening.
lot of crimes. Interesting to me in terms of like whether or not it like does Tawny Cypress know which version of herself is which. I think that when I was talking with Steven Kruger, I asked him like, and I didn't want to know the answer, but I wanted to know whether he knows the answer to a question like, did you burn down the cabin? And he says
Mhm.
that they didn't tell him. They let him play it, and then he had that idea. So first of all, he could be lying to me because he doesn't want to. He's not going to
Certainly.
say, yes, I knew 100% whether or not I did it, and then give away that he did it. And also, different actors could get different things. Like if Tawny Cypress is like, no, I need to know whether or not I am other Ty in this moment, they might tell her that because that's what she needs for the scene. So but I do think it's interesting to probably track like whether or not it is which version of Ty we're seeing at any given time.
Time.
Time. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So this is all really interesting in the fact that we've seen Van has always been the center of like so close to death, right? There are so many times where Van has evaded death. I've also seen a theory, Grace, which I think you'll find interesting, that okay, people dying in the present day directly correlate to being hunted in the 90s wilderness timeline, right? Travis was chased during Doomcoming. He is the first to die in the present
Mm,
timeline. The wilderness chose Natalie. Natalie evaded that death, is now dead in the present timeline.
right.
There is a little bit of, there's something there. Um
So
but
Coach Ben doesn't die, and now he's going to die in the modern day.
could be. But eh, Van is seemingly still sick. I think we all can agree that probably other Ty is going to have a hand in
So
taking that
then, but
man's
we
life.
saw what the doctor said, right? We saw the thing of the doctor being like, "Your cancer's got
But
in
the
remission."
doctor also said, I've never seen this before. So what is going to stop the cancer from then like, nope, I'm back. Hey,
That's
it's me.
your cancer impression is getting so good, Jess.
Thank you. I thought I could use some levity, because
Yeah.
it's a pretty dark
Bloop,
topic.
bloop, I'm back.
I'm back.
I can't do the rolling the R on the bloop. Okay, well, I mean, I guess the piece that we're, skipping over a little bit where we can like sort of finish with the modern day is that like seemingly somebody has died, and it seems to be Lottie, who Ty calls and asks what Lottie meant when she said it was pleased with us, and Lottie doesn't really remember this. And she's talking to the mirror. And then by the end of the episode, she's seemingly found dead.
Yeah.
So in terms of the wilderness providing, I wonder whether this will like appease Ty and Van, or if they like, or at least Ty. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have a ton with Lottie this episode, which is interesting because we see her coming out of a bank seemingly in New York City. She doesn't remember what she was saying back when they were at the compound of it was pleased with us. And when she's looking in the mirror, she's it's hard to tell. I think we can read this one of two ways. She's either practicing a speech that she's going to say to someone else, or she's speaking to herself. So, and we don't know which it is. She says, "I understand I hurt you." Like,
or to the wilderness, right?
or to the
Like
wilderness.
I think that there's this I do feel like in relation to the 90s storyline is there's a real power shift. Obviously, Lottie has, she's been looking at Akila as somebody who might be able to like sort of be the leader, see, after she like sort of put Nat in that position. But I do think like there's a real shift, I think, in the 90s in terms of who is in control and who makes decisions now. It does feel like this moment feels like a turning point where, and if you do think about this, and I'm sad to say, just, but we're basically just about halfway through the supposed 5 year, like 5 seasons plan, right? So if
Mhm.
you sort of see this as like, a middle point, it wouldn't surprise it. This is sort of the moment where like Lottie has like loses a lot of control, and actually now it's Shauna who steps in, and whether or not the belief system is actually the same or not moving forward, like whether Shauna has a different way of ruling than Lottie's, like we pick a card and let, and someone dies and we provide for the wilderness. If this is the moment where like that changes and Lottie starts to think like, oh, we're not doing what the wilderness wanted us to do, that to me feels like there could be something there in terms of who she's talking to say she hurt them.
Definitely. I think the easiest answer we could say, looking at the episode before this, is Shauna, right? Like with giving Callie the necklace. But I don't think Lottie thinks that she was wrong for doing that. So that's kind of where I would have trouble believing that she's practicing apologizing to Shauna. I do think it's more likely she's talking to the wilderness. I want to know what she was doing at the bank. We know, based on season one, that Lottie is the one who had like all of what was the one who accessed Travis's bank.
Right.
So what does the money have to do with it? We know she's fairly wealthy because of the cult and everything. So why is she going to a bank on the day that she dies? What is going on there? I think that's going to be a big question. By the end of the episode, it's Misty is the first one to find out through Walter,
Hmm.
and through the message boards, that Lottie is dead. And it's definitely no coincidence that the staging of her death is so similar to that kind of hatch vision that she has with Laura Lee in the baptism.
Yeah.
And I honestly, Grace, my first instinct was, did Lottie do this to herself? Like,
Mm.
is she sacrificing herself for the rest of the group?
Yeah, one thing I'll say is that the one thing I'll say about this, I don't have confirmed, but also, like Walter says Lottie is dead, and it definitely seems like she's dead. She also maybe could not be dead. Like we don't like. I mean, like we see the body, kinda
We do
I mean,
see the police tape going up, which to me is an
yeah.
indication they have checked her pulse and confirmed her death. But again, it's so quick at the very end that we could come back next episode and boop, she's back
Bloop, bloop.
up. Cancer
I'm
sounds a
back,
lot like when you're
Lottie.
jumping back up,
Yeah, that's
alive.
right. That's right. Okay. We get a little bit of Misty content this episode. She thinks that Walter might have left her something with Svetlana. We're gonna get uh she takes some of the puzzle pieces from Svetlana. She imagines herself
So
stabbing
passive aggressive.
Shauna. Yeah, so passive
So
aggressive.
petty. I loved it.
Yeah. I'd be annoyed. I'm not a super puzzle person, but if I was, I would be annoyed that some of my puzzle pieces were gone.
This has happened to me where I completed a puzzle only to be missing a single piece.
That's the worst.
Mhm.
That's the worst.
It is.
And yeah, she has this vision of stabbing Shauna in the back. So, just
Mhm.
things are there. We're definitely heading probably sooner than later to a Misty Shauna real, conflict. I feel like they've like they're like sort of like Shauna's accusing Misty like to her face, but feels like this isn't going to end particularly well, especially since like Misty's like still grieving, Nat as well. So yeah, this is
Certainly, and
rough.
I also think it's important to point out the parallels between the past storyline and the present, where Shauna is the
Right.
reason that Coach Ben is going to get condemned and found guilty, and she's using the information Misty gave her to do it. So there's more bad blood between these two characters than we originally knew about. Obviously, there's still stuff developing in the past. I just thought that was very interesting. I love how this show parallels the storylines between past and present, and to have Misty kind of be the reason that Coach Ben is found guilty is pretty interesting.
Well, there's that too because both 90s Misty and modern day Misty have killed someone seemingly by accident. Like they're obviously like Crystal obviously in the 90s, and then Nat in the present day, and they're very different deaths. But that is like a lot on Misty, and then to be put in the position where she's kind of like forced to be the defender of Coach Ben, and
Mhm.
then ultimately like the vote goes away in which like Ben dies is I think gonna yeah that's tough for Misty, I think.
Mhm.
Um, okay, well, should we dive into the trial of Coach Ben?
I would love to, because this is, ooh, it's juicy.
Yeah, so Nat is the judge, Ty is going to be the prosecutor, and Misty is the defense attorney. And Nat's going to set up a situation where it has to be 2/3 of a vote. And I do think like I did talk with them quite a bit of the 90s cast about this moment because I do think it is pretty significant because it is a moment where rather than sort of this belief system they've held of like, this person will die and that's the wilderness providing that it's one of the first times it is in result of like them thinking that Ben burned down the cabin, but it is this moment of them actively trying to decide what is true or not true, and like vote on it in a this is more like democratic that I mean it doesn't really seem like it based on the outcome, but more democratic than like pick a card and we're gonna hunt you down and try to kill you, you know.
Right, exactly. And Coach Ben seems to feel like this is a lost cause from the onset, from the very start. Mari gets called to be the first witness, and interestingly, she's swearing on a deck of cards. And when Lottie is the one saying, like, "Oh, repeat after me," Nat is very swiftly like, "Okay, enough of this. Let's move on." Um, And it seems like at first, okay, Mari has some good input. Well, why did Coach Ben get her out of the pit? Why didn't he just leave her in there to die if he really wanted her to die? Why save her? We get some accusations thrown on Shauna by Misty. She's trying to introduce reasonable doubt, saying, weren't you jealous Nat was chosen to be the leader instead of
Mm.
you? You were the one who was able to cut up Javi when the rest of us couldn't. You've done a lot for this crew. You've lost the most. You've lost your best friend, you've lost your baby, and they picked Nat over you. I thought Misty was doing a pretty good job. I mean, we know Thaisa becomes the lawyer, but I
Mhm.
think Misty missed her calling a little bit.
Wow. No, it is good. This tie redirect though here, where she's gonna be like Ben does nothing while Shauna's in labor, and to go into this like this othering of him. I really chatted with Steven Kruger. This is what I really thought was like fascinating, is this idea that Coach Ben, as a gay man in the 90s, his worst fear would have been probably to be ostracized from society. And so it's this very interesting thing, I think, to then like put him in this situation where like, there was this really great documentary I saw a few years ago, about, I think it was on Shudder, about like queer villains and queer monsters, and the reason why it's like so easy to like, the metaphorical, like, oh, the vampires are queer like there's the othering of them, seeing them literally as monsters rather than like the metaphorical monsters that people who are homophobic like put on people. And then I think it's this sort of inversion of all these power dynamics in the show, of Coach Ben being like the coach and the older person, but like it's kind of getting away from him, this like what's happening out there. And then for like them to literally be saying like, you're not like one of us, and like it's because he's being like, please don't eat people, you know, not because of anything else. And so I really found this pretty fascinating in terms, and he talked about a bit like what must be going through his mind is like, how come this keeps happening? How come I keep ending up being on the outs, being ostracized from this group? And I feel like Ty really like hones it, which is, it's very interesting that the character who's saying you're the other is a person who literally has like an other, like an alternate identity in the show. So
Mhm.
yeah, but she's saying like, we're just trying to survive, bro, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is another this is where I do kind of want to introduce the question of motive. Um in terms, I think there are three characters I'm focusing on here. Ty, Shauna, and Van, right?
Hmm.
Because I view Shauna as kind of the person who really wants to stick it to Ben the most. She's going to be the biggest advocate for voting him guilty. Ty, obviously being on the prosecution, is in a similar position. And Van also seems very quick to vote. Yeah, no, he did it. He was the one. He's guilty.
Right.
Alongside Melissa, who very obviously is going along with Shauna. So I think what's important to keep in mind here is we know Van knows about Ty's sleepwalking escapades.
Right.
We know she knows about other Ty. Shauna, I she knows in the present day because obviously they had that conversation. Do you remember, Grace? Does Shauna know about
i
Ty sleepwalking
I don't think so, but I do seem to remember there being something about Ty and Shauna having a connection that I'd have to go, was it?
when they were both sleeping in the attic? Right? Like there's something vague bopping around in my head
Yeah,
with that.
I mean,
But
yeah, I mean, to me, the reason for Shauna in this is, I think that you're right to point out like Van likely knows that Ty could be somebody who did it,
right,
and if you vote a not guilty on Coach Ben, then the question becomes like, well, then who do we think did it, and having to
right.
figure that
There's more
out, and that's
questions being asked.
and that's bad for Van and Ty, instead of just saying it is a matter of survival, I think, for the two of them. For Shauna, what I think what this moment is, and why she's so defiantly saying like Coach Ben did it and actively works to get people to switch, is she is fundamentally trying to take over the way in which this group makes decisions. I think this is
Yeah.
such a turning point for the show in terms of the way they function as a group. And Shauna has, whether or not she pulled the right card or whatever, or like gets elected as leader, she's certainly seems like the leader now.
Her and Nat previously were on the same side of not really believing Lottie's bullshit.
Right.
But it's not enough for Shauna. She's lost so much. I think this is certainly a grab for power. I agree with you. I think while the actions are the same in that Van, Ty, and Shauna all want Ben to be found guilty, the motives are different. Shauna
Right.
wants power. Van, I think, and I think we can look at the dream sequence from last episode as kind of proof of this. She, with the, there's fire in front of her face. Could she know that Ty is actually the one that did this? Other Ty is the one that did this. Maybe Ty doesn't even know, but it's possible that Van does. And because Van believes it, Ty believes it, or they're at least more likely to kind of go along with the other person. But yeah, Ty really goes in on him. He judged us this whole time. He's not one of us, and he hates that. It terrifies him. We're here and alive because we fought to be here and we fought to stay alive, and he tried to take that from us. So she's coming back with a really strong redirect. All the while, I do want to say the injections of the objection
Yeah.
overruled, it added some levity into what is very
Well,
tense.
I think you could go back and find like we're gonna get another. If the thing is all sort of like the most you know, uh, picturesque version of this whole thing, that we could come back and if they do this scene again, if we see like what really happened, if that's, what happens, this could be a really like a pretty intense scene with it
Mhm.
basically just being like, Ty being, accusing Nat trying to hold the peace, Misty coming in to defend thing, and then suddenly you have Shauna sort of jump in and sort of, put the nail in Coach Ben's
Mhm.
coffin in a much more like it seems like a trial. It's not a trial, but it seems like it, as you like imagine it. So I
No,
think
it's
that
more
there's
of an
definitely something
execution than it is a trial. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
yeah.
Ty will call out that Nat seemingly knows where he is the whole time, which again is just like, I think, it's interesting that Ty does that, but it definitely undermines Nat's position as the leader as well
Well,
here.
I think Shauna does that on purpose, right? She goes to Ty as
Oh
head of
yeah,
the
right.
prosecution
Sorry.
to
Yes, I forgot
say,
that happened.
yeah,
Yes.
Nat knew. But yeah, Lottie takes the stand and Misty uses, oh, well, not believing in the wilderness. Could it be Shauna? Could it be Jen or Melissa or Nat? None of them believe in it. Or Lottie could have burned the cabin because it didn't want her to be the leader. And so again, we're really focusing in on who is upset that they're not the leader. And Lottie is another suspect. So we're introducing reasonable doubt. As you said, Nat gets called to the stand, and Misty immediately then calls Coach Ben to the stand. And this is obviously, I mean, in the in the trial of Coach Ben, obviously Coach Ben as a character is going we're going to learn a lot more about him. I really liked getting this history of him and just how exhausted he looked with everything. Like he's almost given up at this point. And we remember, Grace, let's not forget, there was a moment where he nearly just jumped off a cliff and Misty stopped him. So he
Yeah.
has been close to wanting to take his own life,
Right.
and he just looks like he's given up in this scene when he talks about he didn't even really want to be a teacher. He just kind of fell into it. He ended up thinking it was okay. He figured eventually he'd leave schools, but they ended up being really good at soccer, so he stayed. But he had so many opportunities pre-crash to really ruin their lives. He apparently knew about Van and Ty. He knew that if Misty was on the team, she'd get hurt and bullied, right? Like he protected them. And you see everyone start to cry. Like everyone feels really bad about this.
Yeah, he has this sort of this like, I think the end point here where he's like, you cut off my effing leg. You won't listen to me anymore. Like I do think like, I mean, I guess his life is on the line. So like if he did it, I really don't think he did it. And I might be like being, you know, naive here, but it really doesn't feel like he did it. I do also think like the way the votes turn out, like it's 3 to whatever, however many of them there are, until ultimately Shauna convinces them to change. But I don't know. It really doesn't feel like he did it. Because I feel like he's so exhausted. I feel like if he did do it, I feel like he would say it. I feel like he is
Yeah.
that's my, and like, his life is on the line, so maybe not, but that's the impression I get from this.
I think if I had to choose a side, I think I'm currently on the side of he didn't do it, especially because he talks about feeling ashamed, right? And I
Mm,
think importantly, you noted, right, being othered is an everyday life aspect for him as a gay man, especially in the time when this took place. He really was othered very often, and he's felt a lot of shame, and it's coming from his parents as well. And he felt shameful when he couldn't help Shauna, when and maybe there's an aspect to, yes, I'm sure he's afraid with them, eating Javi and that sort of thing. Obviously, there's amount of fear. He's a big guy. He has one leg. He's not super useful to them. And he's othered in that he is an adult and the coach. But it all rings very true to me that he would feel immense shame about all of this, about not being able to provide and not being able to help and save them. And so his move is then just to leave, not to burn them all to the ground, but to just simply leave and live on his own and see if he can do it. Um, I found his monologue to be extremely convincing.
yeah, I do think if there's, like, in terms of then who did it, it does feel like Ty is the most likely candidate, and so then if
Yeah,
you think it like, and that's, like, other Ty, I do think that's a very interesting thing that, we might be setting up potentially. What I think is it's, Shauna and Ty sort of be like, whether or not Ty is sort of like working for Shauna, and what sort of like trouble that causes. Because then we also got this moment with Melissa, who I will say, I feel like the show has sort of slow rolled after sort of the cliffhanger of episode 2. I know it's only been 2
yeah,
episodes, but the Melissa Shauna stuff has like basically not been there until we get this moment where Melissa seems like so wowed by Shauna, and Shauna holds her hand. So we had a little bit more there, which I feel like that was needed a little bit. I know it's only 2 episodes, but it sort of got
yeah.
put on the back burner.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that on the very first vote, it's only Shauna Van and Melissa who
Right.
vote guilty because, as if we remember, Nat, Ty, and Misty are not eligible to vote as they are, they were on the team of council people, whatever. Um, Innocent votes are Travis, Akila, Mari, Lottie. I didn't see Jen vote, and then there's another girl whose name I do not know. A
She's
little
a
bit of a
new
red shirt there,
there's a new
new character.
girl. There's Robin and Britt, I think, are
So,
2.
maybe they both
Yeah.
voted then innocent. They vote over and over and over and over again. And Shauna eventually yells at everyone. And she is like, "Are you kidding me? He definitely killed us." Blah. And Melissa is kind of elbowing Jen, like,
Yeah.
come on. This is
Yeah.
when Jen raises her hand. Then we see, and we've seen this before, Grace. I'm specifically thinking of when Snacky occurred. The wind kind of picks up, right? The wilderness speaks. And that is when Lottie votes with them. And once Lottie votes with them, Travis also then votes with them. And then once Travis votes with them, so does Aquila. So this is so interesting. I
Survivor
personally
Alliance charts, please.
I think the order in which they switch from innocent to guilty is extremely telling of
Right.
not only necessarily the structure of power here, but the believers versus the non-believers, and kind of Lottie and Shauna are not on the same page about the it in the wilderness, right? But Lottie seems to think, at least my interpretation is Lottie seems to think the wilderness is telling her to vote guilty. And so that is why she then votes guilty. And as a result, then
Which,
also Travis and Aquila.
if you do the parallel thing of like, I'm sorry I hurt you, to the wilderness of like, I wasn't listening to you properly, I wasn't doing the right thing,
Yeah.
like, why did we let that happen? I think the interesting piece here too is like, I just like fully correct me if I'm wrong, because I feel like I didn't rewatch it right before. It was did I say what's going to happen to Coach Ben? They'll
They just call him, they say he's guilty,
guilty.
and then someone takes him away, bailiff take him away. They don't say anything.
So
They don't
what could
talk about whether they're going to execute him, but I will say when Travis hands that piece of tree bark with a drawing on it over to Lottie,
mhm.
it looks like it has a person flat on their back. I kind of viewed it as they put that big makeshift like table. I thought it was going
Uh-huh.
to be like a fire pier, almost when they were going to burn Van's body
Right.
back in
Uh-huh.
season 2, 1.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Um, well, there is this. So Travis finds this bark, and it seemingly has like what's gonna happen on it. And then also we have Aquila telling Lottie about the dream that she had, interpreting as a message. So
Mhm.
I do still feel like you're gonna get this like sort of the people who are now at sort of the bot. You have Shauna at the top, I think, having this like you know, we don't have to do it the way we've been doing. Like we can, it's interesting to think that the one that seems more unfair is the one that actually is the more like, judicial like trial system, but like Shauna just exerted her power and control to make it happen. And then this other one that seems more random being sort of like maybe the more like right, like it's very interesting the way that the show is playing with that hierarchy of people. And I think you sort of have around Lottie, you have Aquila and Travis, Nat sort of tangentially, like maybe a little bit over here with Travis, and then you have Shauna, Ty, Van, sort of at the top with Melissa as well. Like there's this very, it feels like they're kind of like
Yeah.
is these two sides thing that doesn't feel like that's like exactly how it will happen. And then the thing, interestingly, in talking about parallels as well, Jess, is that we like where do you put Misty in that? Considering like in the present day, there's so much Shauna Misty. Like that's so much of what the modern day storyline for Shauna is this season of like bad things happening to Shauna and Shauna thinking it's Misty. Will we get some reveal of like as potentially Shauna's authority is like questioned? Is Misty actually potentially seemingly like does Shauna believe that Misty is like is there a reason why
Mhm.
Shauna so quickly is like has to be Misty? Like is there like we talked about like Nat's breaks were cut and that sort of thing, but is there like a 90s you know thing that tells us why Shauna so inherently distress Misty? I
I
think is
think
interesting.
so.
Yeah,
I'm going to put a prediction down here.
do it.
We've seen Melissa she's trying to get closer and closer to Shauna. She says, "Look at what you just did. Do you feel that right now? It's fucking power."
Yeah,
That is not unlike Misty. Misty is so attracted to power. Constantly, she's trying to hover around whomever has the power. Now, could she be at odds with Melissa in terms of, okay, the balance of power has shifted over to Shauna, and Misty isn't in the pocket of the person with the power. Melissa is. So could there be some sort of fight there? I also think if we are, and I truly am at this point in the camp of Shauna is the antler queen that we have seen in the time of Pit Girl, right? At the time of that second winter, that very first scene of the show, if Shauna is antler queen at that point, we know Misty is a part of that cabal, if you
yeah,
will, right?
yeah.
She is a part of that crew. So I could easily see it as being Misty in her mind is extremely close to Shauna because Shauna was the leader. Misty was a devout follower back in that time. So for Misty, that equates to in modern day and present day, we are close. We're friends.
Right.
Shauna doesn't see it like that. That's not how Shauna operates. Shauna is annoyed by
Yeah,
Misty.
yeah.
Always, always annoyed by her. She has no patience for her. And I think Shauna wouldn't respect that Misty leaps from person to power to person to power. She's an opportunist. It doesn't matter what her beliefs are. She is going to hop from power person to power person. So I think that I could see us setting something up where Misty and Melissa aren't necessarily getting along because Misty wants to be close to power and Melissa is
Oh
kind
my
of taking
god,
that spot.
Misty killing no. Yeah, killing Melissa? Oh boy. Wow,
She
that does.
could.
Yeah, wow. Okay. All
I don't
right.
know. I mean, we still haven't met Hillary Swank. We still haven't met Joel McHale. Like,
All right. Well, welcome to my next segment of what do we need answered by next week? Where are the people I was promised would be on the show? Where are they?
where are they?
Where is Hillary Swank? Where
Yeah.
is Jeff Winger? Where are they?
Yeah.
Need to
I
know.
think my other obvious chalk pick going back to what we talked about earlier is that the heck happened to Lottie? Is she actually dead, or is she gonna back on
Yeah.
up?
Yeah. The other one I think too is like what happens to Coach Ben. I'm pretty intrigued by that as well. Mostly because I feel like it's the type of thing they would have saved. Like if they like there's so much in this episode and they had the Lottie thing, but like I don't know. I guess I'm like on the same vein of like we didn't see him die. Like I guess I'm a little like I'm holding out the little bit of hope that like Coach Ben is alive in the modern day. And it feels impossible, but it's like I don't know. This guy feels like he was like easily the first person who should have died. And the fact that he's still alive is astounding. Also, I will just say I got to interview Steven Kruger, and when he showed up on the Zoom call, just like all like very well groomed, and it
With
was
2
like
legs.
I didn't see I can't confirm that he had 2 legs because we
Mm.
chatted over Zoom. But I was like, "Oh, hello, Steven Kruger." Like, they really do you a little dirty on the show. Like, literally, they do you
Oh,
dirty. I was like, "Oh,
yeah.
hello, Steven Kruger." Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he's very handsome. But,
He looks
yeah.
very handsome, but I understand what you mean. He's very, gaunt and
Yeah. Yeah,
tired.
he looks
He
tired.
looks like he's been through it.
Bags under his eyes, he's got the big
They did a
beard,
great
you
job.
know?
Props to the makeup department for, like,
No, you
truly
got
making
that's the
oh, sorry,
props
props to the
department.
props
Props to the
department.
props department. Yeah.
Makeup to the yes.
Makeup to the makeup. I was just gonna say, I think that the show, one thing that's very good is that there's, I think having people who are not Sophie Nélisse and Melanie Linsky playing Shauna, Shauna would be so hateable. I would hate Shauna more, and not Sophie Nélisse as much because like obviously we've seen so much tragedy there, and maybe that's informing what we see with Melanie Linsky too. But like this feels so evil. And the fact that I'm still like, "Ah, but
But
Shauna, oh,
Shauna
Shauna," I
no,
get
I
like,
agree.
I think very kudos to the show. I thought, actually Sophie Thatcher is very good. I think they're all just really good.
Everyone is
I
so good.
and to the point, like, I know, like, if people are not tastemakers listener, I would highly suggest it's one of my favorite podcasts on the network. I co-hosted with Taryn Armstrong, and Taryn gave some hot takes about Yellow Jackets.
I'm gonna
This
correct you.
week.
He gave some wrong takes
He gave
about Yellow.
wrong takes. Jess, we can't publicly say that the
I'm so
tastemaker had
sorry.
bad taste. We can't say
Normally,
that.
he has great taste,
Yeah.
but, in I couldn't hold back, Grace. I couldn't hold
What
back.
my thing that like I don't need people to I mean, I think if you're an hour in on the 4th episode of Yellow Jackets, you're in on Yellow Jackets. So I'm not worried about like anybody here. I love this show. I do think that there are things about it that sort of are like elevate it despite there being a general campiness to the show that I think is not working for some people. And I've spoke to people in the not in the wilderness, but in the real world, Jess, who were like,
Whoa.
I still am worried about the show. And like, is the stuff
Is it,
is
like,
it,
lost PTSD that they're having, or
I think it is. I think it
okay.
definitely is that. I feel like this show for I'm not with Taryn that it's not a good show. I really love this show. I am with a little bit on the like, is it like the best show that's ever existed? I don't like that's not where I'm at. But
No,
in
because that's
terms of
Succession.
because that's Succession. But to me, what I think that this show does extremely well, and there are a few other examples of shows that are on television right now that do the same thing, which is this show knows exactly what it wants to be. And that to me, it's doing that thing exceptionally well. It's this like female driven mystery box, gory, supernatural versus science-y type. It's just like it's found a lane that it's sitting in, and it's doing it extremely, extremely well. If that's not the thing for you, that's fine. But this version of the show is like about as good and as fun as I think this type of show can be. That's my
Mhm.
take. Yeah.
I agree with that, and along those same lines, I do have a question for you, just very quickly. I've seen a little bit. I haven't read too much. I tend to like to sit in my own opinions at least until after we've podcasted before I'm really looking at what other people think of it, right? I want to be able to have my own opinions. Are you finding that we're missing Juliette Lewis? Like, are we missing Natalie's presence in the present day? Are you feeling her absence?
This cast is so humongous that I feel bad as Warren Cole and Sarah Desjardins told me, Juliet's doing great. She's living her life. She's got it going on. That's what they were like. We miss her. There was felt the loss of her on set. Reaching, especially, they said there's nobody more fun to be filming at 3 a.m. with than Juliette Lewis. But I mean, I don't think so. I think that one thing for me that yeah, I think there's so much going on in this show that I'm okay with it. And to be quite honest, Jess, the modern day stuff, I like the 90s stuff. That's really
I think that's not spicy
my
take.
jam. That's really it.
I
Yeah.
think this has been something we've been talking about the entire time we've been podcasting about Yellowjackets, which is that considering the all-star cast in the modern day, right? You're getting your Christina Ricci's and your Melanie Linsky's and obviously Juliette Lewis, Tony Seibert. I could go on and on. Considering that cast is incredibly stacked, I also prefer the 90s timeline. That's where the mystery it lives, in my opinion. But I could see people, if they're gonna pick nits about why the present day storyline isn't
If I
necessarily
was gonna
working
pick
for
Nats,
them.
I'd pick Juliette Lewis. Well, or Sophie the Hedgehog. I would pick either
Yeah,
of them,
how dare
actually.
you?
That's bad. That was bad answer of me.
If they're gonna poke holes though, I could see them saying they missed the Misty and Nat of it all, right? Like their back and forth was so fun. And at times, I don't necessarily think this, but at times I know people haven't really cared for the Shauna and Jeff of it all. I personally think that Jeff trying to get his karma back is the levity that sometimes the show needs, because it is very dark and very heavy, and I don't mind having a little moment where I can laugh either at or with Jeff. So that doesn't bother me. I just was curious. I miss Nat as a character in the present day, but I agree there's enough else going on. And it's not like we didn't feel the impact of her death. We
Oh,
still are.
I agree. And I think, to me, though, the biggest, the thing that works the best about the modern day storylines is when they're tied to, when it's the Yellowjackets. I love Jeff as well, but the reason why Shauna's storyline didn't work at all for me is because it was so disconnected from everything else. And when we really when the ultimate reveal doesn't tie back into everything, it just turns out Adam was Adam. He's just some guy. That was not fun. But now that the way you have Shauna linked with Misty in the modern day, you have Ty and Van doing other things, those are working for me well enough that they feel like they work in conjunction with all of the stuff that's happening in the 90s. That was just my complaints about the season. What's up. But I do think that the 90s stuff, to me, I was so drawn in by last week, the dream sequence, this week by the trial of Coach Ben. To me, it seems like where they're having the most amount of fun. And I think I think it's the funnest stuff on the show.
I agree. It's also just like you said, there's Lord of the Flies energy. There's how is this group of teenage girls going to get along? We know there's going to be drama. There's going to be strife. Can I leave us on one final tiny addition to the yellow filter theory?
Please.
Mercury poisoning.
Yeah.
Which we've talked a lot about mercury poisoning on this podcast and elsewhere, right? With the theorizing about the
I say it on every
mining.
podcast I'm on. I'm like, hey, be careful about mercury poisoning.
Watch out for
you,
mercury.
You always cut it out, which I think is that's bad.
I'm forced to edit it out, Grace. People don't like it. But
who does like it?
A lesser talked about symptom
of
mercury poisoning is the yellowing of the eyes.
Oh, eyes are so important, obviously, to this show. From No White Man, the promotional image. That's interesting. I think that's
because you think about the lens as eyes themselves, the yellowing of them, and could be something there. I don't know. We'll see.
Thing that I think the one way that I think that could work is in the sense that they all being like, oh my God, what we did out there was so bad. And then getting a modern day reveal of I don't know how this goes, but you guys know that you were all poisoned with mercury, and they're like, oh, thank God, because it like maybe like absolved, like the fact that they wouldn't know that maybe that's what was happening, and they did all this bad stuff, and they're trying to hide it and cover it up, and then the fact that it gets sort of like revealed that like, oh my God, this might have been what happened, and being some sort of like absolving, at least for some people, about like how bad. I don't think every single. I think we lose a fair amount more people on the show before the end of its run, but this a little bit of idea of like whoever's left alive being like, okay, we were like mercury poisoned, feels like,
Mhm.
you know, some solace maybe for them, but who
Yeah.
knows? Speaking of theories, Jess, I think we still plan to come back maybe after the end of next week's episode
Yep.
to do a bonus theories pod. So please send those in. You can find us on social media. You could, we're in the old PSR Discord. There are plenty of ways for you could throw them in the YouTube comments as well. Plenty of ways for you to get your theories over to us, and we will ponder them more deeply in a bonus pod. Yeah. No promise on that, but we do hope to make that happen. So
Mhm.
yeah. Anything else, Jess, before we wrap up? Anything? Yeah, anything?
No, I'm really enjoying the show. It's so
It's
good to
been
be
good.
back.
It's
Like
been good.
there's a lot. Don't get me wrong. We're in a really lovely time for television. Like we got Severance happening, Yellow Jackets. Like there's so The Last of Us is just on the horizon. The White
The
Lotus.
Pit. People are loving The Pit. There's lots of good TV
Oh,
out there. Yeah.
yes. So much good television out right now. It's an embarrassment of riches. I
It's
still
embarrassing television. It's embarrassing.
It's I love the show so much, and I'm so happy that season 3 has been as good as it has been, because I know some people were down on season 2, and I feel like we're barreling towards a really great season, like this being like boom, solidified great season of Yellow Jackets. So
I agree.
I can't wait till next week.
All right, Jess, what else you got going on?
You could follow me at the Jess Sterling. I'm mostly on the blue ski these days. And hear me on, I'm gonna list 3 different podcasts. If it's your vibe, go check it out. Shit 90 Shows Taught Me, where I talk 90s content. We're currently in just starting season 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as well as season 4 of Felicity. And then over on Talking Shit, where I talk Shit's Creek every single week, which has been a ton of fun. And then, of course, Look for the Light, where we're going through season 1 of The Last of Us, leading up to the season 2 premiere, which is so soon, and it actually has a final date now in April. So go check out all those things.
So soon. If you're not listening to the Tastemakers, even though Taryn has one bad take, it's the only bad one, we
The
promise.
only bad take he's ever had in his whole
Yeah.
life.
We talk about all the TV and movies and tell you what you should and shouldn't watch. So check that out. Also, if you wouldn't mind checking out the work that I've been doing for Parade, interviewed, as I said, Steven Kruger. I interviewed lots of folks from Cobra Kai. Should have some other Yellow Jackets content coming in coordination with this episode, and some White Lotus stuff as well. I'm ranking who's most likely to die each episode, which has been very fun. Not each episode, who's most likely to die after each episode. But yes, check that out. Parade.com. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another recap of Yellow Jackets. Until then, buzz, buzz, buzz.